navigate the realities of speaking across cultures, continents, and expectations. From Asia to Africa, Europe to Americas, and combined experience gives us a grounded, real world perspective on what works and what doesn't when stepping into an international stage. So please see Chantal Bother on the stage, building inner confidence in leaders and women across the globe. Sandeep Nath, kids renewing human consciousness from Mexico to New Zealand. And Vikram Anand, the people podcaster, elevating HR, leadership, and life across SIA. And welcome everybody to our show. I'm so excited to interview you today.
Thank you so much, Olga. Really, really excited to be here from very, very hot Cape Town. I don't know if anybody has heard, but Cape Town is having a huge heat wave at the moment. So, Olga, I'm going to make you jealous. I'm heading to the beach this afternoon. Got to do this, right? But in the meantime, you know what? We really wanted to just gather today and speak about how speaking is not just about travel. You know, when I first started speaking, or long before I started speaking, I had this idea that it was so glamorized. You get to travel around the world and collect passport stamps. And it's not about that. It's actually about creating impact across cultures. And that's the stories that we want to bring to you today. How do we create impact across cultures? Because that last word, the cultures, that's what makes the impact when we understand those cultures. So Sandeep, why don't you just lead us in a little bit, give us a bit of context in terms of VSAI and why this conversation matters today?
Sure, and thank you, Olga. You've been a pillar of support for VSAI, and like you said, this is international. VSAI exists because there are so many of us around the world who would like to grow through a global network, who would like to learn what's happening around the world across cultures, what's creating impact. And VSAI brings together all that from everywhere in the world. We have more than 300 members, and you get peer level learning that's above par. Personally, I'm from India, and when I joined the VSAI, I discovered that you could do a lot more with the internet. It was the time of the pandemic as well, but to really up the game with that, that's what VSAI got personally for me. And today, this conversation is about how all of us have something unique to share. And I'm going to hand it over to Vikram to take us through who we are and what each one of us has for you today.
Hey, thanks, Sandeep. Thank you so much. Really nice to have you and Chantal and everybody who's watching us live on YouTube. I am Vikram, and it is great to be called myself as a speaker, purely because it is Professional Speakers Day and Celebration Day, and all of us are celebrating being part of this amazing speaker community. Now, one of the topics we in VSAI are really going to share our thoughts, our insights, and some little nuggets about from us, or some little secrets, if I may say, is about how, as speakers, as a speaking community, we impact across cultures. And which is very important, because even though we are connected virtually, some of us are connected right now in person who are attending GSS Canes, but at the same time, a lot of us are connected virtually. So how do we understand each other's cultures, and how do we impact them at a speaking level, professionally, personally, and so on and so forth? Now, before we dive in, a quick round of who we are. It is very important for all of us to know who these three kind of people are from VSAI. We are part of the VSAI board. Not our bio in detail. We are not here candidate profiling ourselves, but just to tell with each one of you, which is that, I'll start with you, Chantal, which is that one country, one stage, if you can wrap it up in one sentence, where did you go, which from a culture impact perspective, as a speaker, had the biggest influence on you, or you added value to the speaking community? Can you go for it, Chantal?
Thanks, Vic. So yeah, in terms of context, I have spoken on every continent virtually, but in terms of feet on continent, I've only ever spoken in Mauritius. So that's my context.
Okay. And what is that one experience you've had within that context about you? You've been speaking for a while now, Chantal, which you would like to quickly highlight to us.
Oh, research your audience. I'm gonna share some stories later, but research your audience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Park that. We'll come
Okay.
back to it.
Okay, very interesting. So that is about Chantal. She's been speaking in a lot of continents and across a lot of stages. I have had Chantal on my podcast, and she's really, really a great speaker. Moving on to our friend Sandeep. Sandeep, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, one stage, one country in one sentence, and where you've had that impact as a speaker? What is that from a culture perspective you learned?
Right. So I really liked what Chantel said, research your audience. And that's why for this particular session, I thought we're going to have people from around the world, and we're talking about impact across cultures. So let me bring to you the experiences I have had speaking in China, speaking in France, and speaking in Mexico. So that's what I'll be bringing to you. What happens by way of humor, what happens by way of glitches, and all of that. So we'll deep dive in a bit. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. As far as I'm concerned, I am going to share about a few countries where I have spoken. Even though originating from India, I'm currently based in Malaysia. I've been living here for a while. And I have spoken in a few other Southeast Asian countries. So wherever I've spoken, I've got an experience of, even though APAC or Southeast Asia might just feel or look very similar, trust me, from a speaking perspective, it is very, very different culturally when you walk into each of these countries and how they operate, how people kind of listen to you, how people respond to you when you want to engage with them. And I will also be sharing a bit of my insights along the course of our discussion today with all of you. So without further ado, let's see how impact across cultures impacts us through a very virtual conversation happening. Chantal is right in a different time zone. Sandeep is in a different time zone. I'm in a different time zone. And I'm sure each one of you listening to us is in some kind of a time zone across a 24-hour clock. So let's move on that one. And I'm going to pass it over to Sandeep to kind of take us through the next very, very meaty, very interesting part of the discussion. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thank you so much, Vikram. And that's a very smart move, because I'm in India, in between South Africa and Malaysia. And so let me attack South Africa. We attack both these days, right? Chantal,
Yes.
let's talk about some of the moments that you discovered the importance of being aware of culture and what happened. Could be pre-stage, could be on stage, could be goof ups. Just tell us something interesting, either in Mauritius or South Africa, or you've been speaking across the world. Over to you.
Oh, Sandeep, you're asking me to get vulnerable here, but I suppose that's what we do, right?
You do perfectly. I know you.
So it was shortly after I joined the Professional Speaking Association. I raised my hand to speak at our home association in Cape Town, in South Africa. But although I had been speaking for some time as part of my career, I hadn't yet understood this dynamic of being a professional speaker and all the nuance that it meant. So, of course, I came along to this Cape Town Association meeting, and I decided to do a talk called "We Are the Change Makers." I'm very motivational, and you guys will know me as I bring the energy and I encourage and I inspire and I stretch people, but I'm also unconventional. Now, unconventional is good, but sometimes we need to check unconventional, because sometimes unconventional can be a bit of a risky move. Mm-hmm. So this talk, "We Are the Change Makers," I started the talk by framing Hitler as a change maker.
Ooh.
And I know.
Ooh.
Yeah, you experienced much.
What happened?
Oh, wow. You know, the interesting thing is when I started my talk, I clocked a gentleman in the audience and I thought, wow, I don't want to be, but he looks like he's Jewish. And I thought, careful, Chantal. So as I started, and I couldn't change the content of my talk, my slides were done, Hitler was coming through, whether I liked it or not. And I framed him as a change maker. And I kept coming back to, this doesn't condone what he did, but he got people to follow him. How do we learn from that sort of example? And I believe the talk went well because I kept putting that caveat in. But I think that I saw this man and I saw his response, and I was benchmarking my whole talk on this man's response. And he did not look impressed. After the talk, Charlotte came to me and said, Chantal, you're unconventional, but not sure that was the wisest thing. I said, I know, I agree. Here's the thing, Sandeep, you know what happened afterwards? And I'll never know whether this was tied to my talk or not. But that gentleman left the association within about 2 weeks of that talk.
No, I'm sure you don't take any of that responsibility.
Yeah.
Things happen in people's minds. But yeah, you pivoted well. Go on.
Well, that's it. I teach that we've got to be responsible for our words, but we can't be responsible for the reaction that people have to our words. But having grown now a little bit more, I've learned to research my audience a little bit more, and I've learned to bring confrontation and provocative subjects in perhaps a more palatable way. So that's my 2 cents worth, Sandeep.
Well, very interesting. Like I said, researching the audience is everything. And before I bring you in, Vikram, let me just share, it's kind of related. When I was speaking in China, I kind of knew that these guys have very deep respect. They don't have a great sense of humor, like they wouldn't laugh out loud the way people would in other places. But anyhow, I wanted to start with praising them, and I'd just been on their train network, and I was sort of comparing that with the Indian train network in a sort of self-deprecating way, and anybody in India would have laughed their guts out because of that episode where I got onto the wrong train, even though everything was set right. These guys, of course, there is a gap in translation that you have to prepare for. So after about 30 seconds the translator spoke, they were still very silent. I said, what happened here? And I went on. I discovered later that we've got to remember that all of humor is grounded in tragedy. And if I caught the wrong train, that was a tragedy. And they were actually very respectfully sympathizing with me in a sense and not getting the joke. It wasn't supposed to be a joke as far as they're concerned. So we've got to sort of respect that very, very subtle emotional nuance as well. And so I did. And the next time I spoke, I didn't get into self-deprecating humor, but I just got into something that was generally humorous. And by now I had some bonding with the translator. So these guys, after I finished, after the 30-second translation pause, they all went, like Shin Chan would go on a Cartoon Network. And that felt good, and it felt a little AI, And so I asked the translator later, what happened? So he was very honest with me. He said, the speaker said this, blah, blah, blah. And then he expected it to be funny enough. And so that was great bonding, Funny things happen. So cool. So Vikram, tell us something about what happened with you, man.
Very interesting story from yourself, experience from yourself, Chantal, as well as Sandeep. I wish I had a translator to one of the sessions I did in Malaysia. Now, I can say I definitely done a lot of speaking around within the region. But if for somebody very, very initially many years back, when you are somebody when you come from a country like India, and then Indians are generally very engaging in a speaking conference or in a town hall or something like that. They will have questions, they will raise their hands, they will engage with you. Malaysians are also, but they do not ask you questions as much as compared to some of the others. So I went in a mode of sharing some insights, and then suddenly I took that pause, thinking and assuming that there would be questions coming through. And there was this pin drop silence, that dead silence for, I think, 10 seconds or 15 seconds, which could have probably killed me as well. So I was like, what's happening out here? So in order to kind of cater to that, I asked somebody directly, so what do you think about it? And unfortunately, I picked up the wrong person, because that person had a very confronting thing to say. And when he said that, I went into a answering mode. And when I went into an answering mode, it became a two-way dialogue, then becoming a session about people listening to a speaker in a particular way. And it went on for almost, I think, a couple of minutes. But it was more about him and me vis-a-vis what everybody wanted to share or I wanted to share. So I think that was a huge, from a culture perspective, it was a huge learning experience for me, that if in a particular culture, people are not going to engage with you or question or even confront to you in a particular way because the culture is like that, then you should just share your bits, share your insights. And if they do not, then move on very quickly to the next bit, which you have to, because you cannot get stuck assuming that somebody is going to ask you or somebody is going to engage with you. So while my sense of humor has been quite good in many ways than one within Malaysia, but also I have learned a couple of times in the hard way that everybody doesn't, like in UK or in west part of the world, the little sarcastic humor, either it is in Australia or in UK, people get it. But it is very different if you say the same thing in this part of the world. They would not take the little sarcasm very well. So a couple of very interesting lessons learned from me while speaking here, but definitely a lovely audience to engage with and interact with.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting now that I think about it, because, as we move from China to Malaysia to India and then to the West, like you said, the respect that people have for the speaker's space and for the message, it keeps changing. Like I remember this time in Paris, and I'm going to talk about pre-event, and I'd like you also, Chantel, to think of something that we can share with the audience about what happens pre-event. What happened with me was that I was aware that the French are very polite people, and bonjour, and that's the only French word I can mispronounce. The others I can't even say. But that's something to be said to everybody, the technician, the camera guy, the mic guy, everybody, they feel good, acknowledged before you start speaking. But I did see that speakers who didn't, who just came in the Western way and, just sort of waved around like they were sent by the Pope, they did not get as smooth an experience, as frictionless an experience with the support guys. Now, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of speakers from associations around the world who are going to deep dive into this aspect. But I'd love to know from your experience, Chantel, either on respect or on how you handle a flawless stage experience.
A bit of background noise there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's something in backstage. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's a bit distracting, right? But all good. Sandeep, you know what I'm going to pick up? You speak about and how do we respect the audience before we walk in the front door. Given my earlier faux pas with the Hitler context, I've become very, very mindful of the examples that I use and my setting stories. Because, when you take the stage, you start with a story, or at least I do, and that kind of sets the tone for what you want to bring across.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was speaking in Mauritius last year, I was doing some training basically on integrity, but it was really about the company aligning their values, their personal values with the corporate values, and building that integrity from within. So I thought, what story do I use it? And I chose to use the story of Mandela and how he used those 28 years in prison to work on himself and how he was able to come out after working on himself and change the trajectory of our country. But I did a lot of research beforehand in terms of this is a South African story and I'm taking it into a Mauritian context. And how do I tie it together? How do I respect the audience? So what I did is I had a backup story and I tested the Mandela story up front. If I didn't get the response that I got, I could move to my backup story so that I could respect the audience more. But as it so happens, they loved the Mandela story, and I got that engagement right up front. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. So I at least had two stories.
It sure does. And I was wondering if, Vic, would you have something to add to that? We have a couple of minutes for this section.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, thanks, Chantal, for that. The only thing I would say, I gave an example of, a couple of challenging experiences I've had. I would give a couple of examples of how warmth and connecting prior to your speaking gig plays a very, very important role. Because whether it is any country in Southeast Asia, or it is India or Malaysia or Indonesia, food connects people like anything. So if you're a speaker and if you're a foodie like me, I would definitely request you to be there at 8:30 in the morning, 8:15 in the morning. Be there when the initial morning coffee or breakfast is served, or if your session is in the afternoon, then be there consciously during lunch hour, because a lot of people, whether it is in India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, they connect over food. And if you're able to build that connection with them over food or that normal chit chat, then when you are on stage as a speaker, there are 2-3 things which happen. Point number one, they clap more for you because the bond is already connected. They are more engaged with you. Second, that they are engaging. They might ask you questions because they've heard you a bit prior to your session. So they will engage with you much more than anticipated. So there are few benefits of connecting with your audience through the a coffee or a coffee break or a lunch break or a snack break prior to you delivering your session, and it makes a huge difference, at least culturally in this part of the world. I'm pretty sure it does across the globe, but this part of the world definitely. India, Malaysia, Singapore and Indonesia, 4 countries I've spoken, I can tell you it makes a lot of difference. Thank you, Sandeep.
So true, so true. Vikram, that is so practical, and I've got to hand it to you. This is what we need, because we have so many different experiences, so many different learnings. Through line, the whole world is kind of, all of humanity is very similar in a way, but like food, for example. So when we've got to really implement the best impact that we can have as a speaker, regardless of the culture, we've done our audience research, we've mingled with them, but how do you think we can actually get there? So I'm actually literally going to hand this over to you, Vikram, if you could speak about that, and maybe Chantal will add in later.
Thank you, Sandeep. That's very interesting, and I'm going to kind of go it back to Chantal on this one. Chantal, you've shared a couple of very interesting experiences. Can you give us, from a pure culture perspective, in terms of whether there was humor or translating into a different kind of embedding into their culture, did play a particular part or did play a particular role in terms of your speaking gig at any point in time?
Vic, you know what I've learned from a cross-cultural perspective is, and I talk about this a lot from stage, I talk about how we're humans first, how we've got to, how man was not designed, or humankind was not designed to live in a vacuum. You know, if I look back on my early career and my early speaking, I came up with an idea, I delivered my idea, I did my research, and I was operating in a vacuum. And it was through building the associations and building relationships that I started stress testing my ideas. And particularly after Charlotte challenged me on my Hitler concept, I thought, why didn't I check this with another speaker beforehand? Someone who's perhaps a bit more experienced than I am. Or even, it doesn't matter about experience, right? It's about stress testing your ideas with people. And I know that Sandeep has challenged me while we were in the green room on, but Chantel, why didn't you pick up the phone and talk to me, right? And it seems this is my thing, when I get too much in my head and I don't talk. So let this be an encouragement to every single speaker out there. Test your ideas, pick up the phone, find a friend, belong to an association, and test those ideas from a culture and a message perspective, from a translation perspective. We've got to work together. This is collaboration. It might be your talk, but collaborate to make sure that it's landing right.
Nice. Chantal, very interesting insights you're sharing in terms of that perspective. Any honest mistakes, Sandeep, you would like to share? Anything across in your experience in your speaking gig you would share? Yes, I would raise my hand up and say, I think honestly I made a mistake there. I know I'm putting you on a little bit of a spot, Sandeep, but if you can share, that would be lovely for our audience.
Oh, I'd love to. Nothing you say can put me on a spot. As Chantal was saying, that was a beautiful plug for VSAI. You've got friends here, and I can talk to Vikram or Chantal about absolutely anything that I can't talk to so many people who I've met physically. So thanks for that question. And let me open out to Mexico. My wife was from Mexico. And so when we were there, we did a lot of workshops and speaking. And one thing I figured was that people were always very connected with her and a little distance from me, a little aloof. Now, part of my ego felt good about that because, I was the guru guy, but I didn't want it that way. And that's when she told me that what you're not doing right is you're not hugging people. And in India, we hug, but we don't hug across the sexes. But in Mexico, if you haven't hugged, then don't talk to me. So there I became a hugger, and a hug and a peck and all that. And then people started opening up and they started listening. And you can't be speaking on a stage unless you've bonded, which you did food, and I did with hugging. Another thing I'd say is another bonding thing. Just before I hand over back to you, is that any place you go outside your country to speak, or even within your country, if you're as diverse as India, every state is different, you must take a look at the marketplaces. Because this is where you understand the core that drives the DNA of your audience. How do they buy? How do they talk to each other? And then when you are one-on-one with those guys, you sort of start that tonality and that vibration, and everything goes smooth from there onwards. So go to the supermarket, go to the vegetable market, and have a good time. And over to you.
That's a good tip. Go to the market. That is such a great tip. And I come back to my time in Mauritius. I learned so much at the markets just by watching the interactions. So I really think we need to mark that one. Vic, what do you say?
I totally agree. I think I learned a lot by going to something called as Pasar Malam, which is a local market in Malaysia, which is very, very local. When you go there, you understand the culture, you understand how people operate. But so if you're able to embed yourself as a speaker when you're going to a particular country, and whether, like Chantal said, reach out to somebody, speak to somebody, and ask what is culturally, what happens here, how do people operate, how do people connect. It will play a very, very important role in terms of you being able to connect and bonding when you're actually going to speak. And sharing about mistakes, I will be also honest about one, like Sandeep had about going out there and hugging people in Mexico. It is absolutely the other opposite side in this part of the world, especially with the Malay community. especially the females. And again, I'm talking from my pure experience many years back. I'm talking more than a decade back. But when I came in, I thought you can shake hands with everyone, but predominantly a lot of Muslim females, in terms of their culture, whether it is Malaysia or Indonesia, they do not even shake hands, forget hugging you or anything like that. So I did, in very initial period, I did used to reach out with my hand with all the enthusiasm and the energy I used to have. And then they used to refrain from kind of obviously shaking hands with you. And then obviously I learned my lesson the hard way, and I realized that one of the key learnings in that is you just fold your hands the old Indian style way, which is the best. You fold your hands with them and they will reciprocate. You can put your hand on your heart and you can say, nice to meet you. And but then interestingly, there are also, I've learned over the years, there are also some Muslim females, Malay females who do shake hands. So if they are reaching out to you first, that they extend their hand to you first in a professional setting, then it is fine. Because if they reach out to you, it is fine. But if they don't reach out to you, be 101% sure you do not have to shake hands with them. So that was kind of a very interesting experience for me as well. Absolutely, 180 degrees different to what Sandeep experienced in the west part of the world. So again, knowing the culture, very, very important. Yeah. I'm bringing it back to you, Sandeep. Do you want to add something to that? You were smiling and you were connecting with me on that one.
I was totally, because it's so interesting how, as you move from the Orient to the Occident, things flip over 180 degrees, and you can almost predict, like you can predict the time, everything is set to the UTC somewhere in Europe. But I wouldn't have anything to add to that. I think, Chantel, take it away.
I think we've look, it's been amazing just chatting about this, but if I had to kind of distill the 3 key points or the 3 key learnings for rapid fire implementation, I'm going to summarize our conversation very quickly. Number 1, talk to people before you deliver a talk, right? Whether it's in your home country, like mine was, and you make a massive cultural faux pas, or whether it's internationally, talk to other speakers, stress test your ideas, right? That's the first thing. The second takeaway that I'm seeing, and I think this is absolutely brilliant, is go and visit the markets. Get to the country that you're speaking at earlier in enough time to go and visit the markets, to go and see how the locals interplay with one another. Have a few conversations. Are you noticing that thread? Talk, right? And then the third point is, when you're in a foreign country, let the foreigners lead. And I think that's a great point from Vikram. Don't assume that not everyone wants to shake your hand, but let them lead in terms of how they're going to, how they want to show up and how they want to engage with you. Do you guys, how do you feel? Do you feel like we've kind of got the spirit of the learning here?
Can I add one more? Can I add one more?
Absolutely.
And then I'll go and give you another.
I'm in the flow. So one of the things I would definitely also add to the three which Chantal summarizes. Also, when you go to the local market, when you connect with somebody locally, when you before you're going to come up on stage, be prepared with at least initial introductory words in the local language, or a thank you or a good morning, or if you can go beyond that, if you can say a sentence, the kind of bond it connects with the local people, whether if you're in India, do it in the local language. India has many languages, but if it's Hindi or anything in Malaysia, if it is Bahasa Melayu, you can start off with something like that. But just the way you greet, I know a lot of politicians do that, but interestingly, as a speaker also, if you can greet people in the local language, and if you can wrap up your speaking gig in a local language with a one sentence, I think that makes a huge difference about you as a speaker. It shows you've made an effort to be as local as possible. Back to you, Sandeep.
Yeah, no, this is a great point. And I was eager to speak because we were talking about time, and suddenly it struck me that there's a very important aspect of your impact based on the culture when you understand people's sense of time. So, as a speaker, I would always land up about half an hour before the engagement or 10 minutes before an online one. Excuse me. But that serves well in the East. Okay, it starts not serving so well in India, where people would typically land up about 15-20 minutes late. And by the time you reach Mexico, people would land up, the organizer would land up half an hour late. So then, if you are worked up or if you are showing any sort of disrespect, that goes against you. And you've got to factor that in, but still land up half an hour earlier, cool your heels for an hour, and then wait to start the program about 1 hour after its scheduled time. And this is where one of the important lessons that I learned was my wife and I had been committed to a friend for dinner at 7 p.m. And no, dinner generally, dinners in Mexico are later than 7, but the talk was at 5. And so we thought it's close by. That's why we fixed up the dinner there. We go across. Now the talk started at 6, and it finished at 7:15 or so. And then what happened? Then that food thing happened, because if you are not having your drinks and snacks with the crowd later, you've just alienated yourself from maybe more business, maybe more people wanting to hold on to your message. And so you just sort of left the impact out open because you haven't taken that time post event, which is a good 3 hours after the scheduled time, to still be with them. And so we had to cancel the dinner, and we had these snacks, whatever, crackers and cheese and whatever, and had a great time in the evening. Of course, it's very easy to have a great time in Mexico. But that was something was on my mind, and therefore I was taking the mic away. Back to you, Shanta.
But Sandeep, just picking up on what you say about timing and punctuality, I have a curse, right? The curse is, it doesn't matter how much I try, I cannot be late. I'm super punctual. But we've got this thing in Africa called mañana time, and it's probably a very similar thing to Mexico, where it'll happen when it happens, and no one's fussed about it. And you're absolutely right. As speakers, it's our job just to relax into that and to follow the lead, of our hosts, of our organizers. And it's more time to connect, right? Which is what this is all about. So I think I'm going to start wrapping this conversation up, and we've shared quite vulnerably about our stories, our lessons, our learnings, and how other speakers can benefit from this. But I'm going to turn this last round a bit more personal. Today is Professional Speakers Celebration Day, otherwise known as Pie Day. And we have this concept about making the pie bigger as opposed to dividing it into smaller and smaller pieces. So I'd like for each of us to end this segment with sharing, why are you proud to speak across borders? And no, you're not allowed to say because it creates impact. Let's see if we can come up with something a little different. We know it creates impact, right? Vikram, how about you kick us off?
Okay, thanks, Chantal. Now that you've already alienated me from saying the answer I was going to say, so I'm going to say, I think yes. I mean, yes, we all know as speakers there are tons of good speakers across the globe, and we all do our best when we are on stage to create that impact. So no denying that at all. But I think I genuinely enjoy being a speaker across countries, across continents. Would love to do it more. Probably the West. I think it is purely because the sheer, which is exactly what you're learning, which is the sheer experience of learning a different culture. It is the sheer experience of understanding what happens in that particular culture. Now, if we would not have experienced other cultures, we would have been so much siloed down to ourselves. And that is why, for me, one of the best parts, the reason I enjoy being a speaker is going to another country and learning about their culture and embedding into that culture to deliver and make an impact of what we do. Again, I went back to impact. Sorry for that, Chantal, but I did tweak my answer a bit.
Beautiful. I love that, Vic. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot. Cindy, how about you?
Frankly, Vic stole my answer.
I knew it.
But I'm going to say this because you reminded me of it, that several years ago, when the Professional Speakers Association of India was set up, I caught up with an old friend at a conference, and he was one of the founding members. And we were talking because I was doing workshops around the world at that stage, and he said something that I think is going to be very useful for our listening audience here, especially those who are really trying to see how to become a professional speaker. Is it worth the investment? And it takes investment in building yourself up as an asset. But what he said was that, Sandeep, you probably addressing 20 people in a workshop. How would you like to address 2,000? And you're probably earning X per hour. How would you like to earn 10X? Now I said, man, this is crazy. This is a straight multiplier 100, 1,000 times. And how does that work? And that's when he said, get into the world of professional speaking. And I said, what is that? And that took me on to this stage where I get paid to listen and get feedback about so many beautiful places and people and cultures, as Vikram was saying, that I would have normally been spending my hard-earned workshop money on. So here we are. Thank you. I'm proud to be a VSAI speaker and a professional speaker of the GSF because it makes me grow as a human being. Over to you.
Absolutely beautiful. I love it. All right, so you've both kind of stolen my answer, but I'm going to give you my perspective. Why I'm proud to speak across borders. I saw a sign in a shop window the other day, and it actually stopped me in my tracks. 3 words: travel kills prejudice. How's that for a mic drop moment? Right. So the more we can travel, the more we can open ourselves up to these different cultures. Yes, I know I'm stealing from both of your answers now. The more we can get different perspectives, the more open-minded we become. And the less prejudice we have and the less bias we have, and the more we can open up this consciousness of ours, the more we can create impact. Because that's really what this is about, the impact across cultures. So Professional Speakers Celebration Day exists because this work matters. It's the speaking, it's using your voice, but it's also ultimately about that impact across cultures. Guys, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I always love talking to my VSAI co-hosts and members. But Extian, we are back to you.
Thank you, Extin, Jamwat, and everybody at the back end.